Right now, while your wood stove is burning, 2/3 of that heat is going straight up your chimney and out into the cold night air. You're feeding it 3 logs to get the warmth of one. The other 2, gone, up the pipe. You paid for them, you split them, you stacked them, and you're heating the sky. Now sit a spell, friend. My great-granddaddy built this cabin in 1879. In the corner sits a cast-iron potbelly stove my granddaddy set there before I was born. And on the coldest morning of my life, 11 below, January of '62, the kind of cold that cracks a fence post like a rifle shot. I came down those stairs at dawn and that cabin was warm. The floor was warm. The stove had been dead for 6 hours and it was still throwing heat. Down in town that same morning, folks woke up to frost on the inside of their windows. I'm Wendell Pruitt, 72 years on Pruitt Creek, here in Harlan County, Kentucky. And tonight I'm going to show you the $40 trick my granddaddy did to that stove. The one that pulls the heat back out of the chimney before it's gone. And why a line in a builder's code in 1979 made sure your daddy never learned it. The government's own laboratories measured every bit of it. Not banned, not disproven, just erased. So here's what you walk away with tonight. The $40 part that catches the heat you're losing, you can buy it this week. Exactly where it goes on the pipe. And the way to burn that doubles what the same wood gives you. And stay to the end. There's a man up on Black Mountain who hasn't bought a tank of heat and fuel in 9 years. I drove 6 hours to stand in his front room and see how. That's the part nobody's talking about. Whether you heat with a brand new stove or a hand-me-down from 1972, every word applies to you. You don't need a permit. You don't need a contractor. You don't need one soul's permission. Now, here's the number that ought to make you angry. The average American family spends right around $1,400 a year just to heat their home. And for folks on heat and oil or propane up north, it runs well past $3,000. Run that out 20 years, and you're looking at $30,000, $40,000 to stay warm. And here's the gut punch. The U.S. Department of Energy says an open fireplace can actually run a heat loss. It sucks more warm air up the chimney than it puts in the room. Even a plain wood stove sends most of its heat up the pipe. My granddaddy heated this whole cabin on about 2 cords a winter and a $40 piece of tin. The folks down the road burned 6 cords in a stove just like his and still froze. Same wood, same cold. One difference. He caught the heat the chimney was stealing. Now stay with me here, because this is where the men in the white coats come in. The fire in your stove burns at around 1100 degrees, but the smoke and gas going up your stovepipe? On most stoves, that flue runs 400 to 900 degrees, and all of that is heat you already paid for, walking straight out the top of your house. The Forest Products Laboratory, that's the U.S. Forest Service's own lab up in Madison, Wisconsin, been studying how wood burns since 1910, measured it plain. A fire in an open hearth gives you back maybe 10 cents of heat on the dollar. A tight wood stove, 30 to 50. But a stove that captures the flue heat and burns its own smoke runs close to 80. So here's the line I want you to carry out of here. Burn $1 of wood in an open fireplace and 90 cents of it goes straight up the chimney. You keep a dime. Burn that same dollar in Granddaddy's stove and you keep 80 cents. That's not a little better. That's 8 times the heat out of the very same armful of wood. And the difference is a $40 piece of tin. And there's 2 more things at work. The first is that smoke itself is fuel. When you choke a fire down wrong, it smolders, and that gray smoke going up your pipe is unburned wood gas. The chemists call the tarry part of it creosote. Burn it right, at a high enough heat, and that smoke catches fire a second time inside the stove. They call it secondary combustion. You get a second wave of heat and a clean pipe both at once. The second thing is mass. Granddaddy lined that stove with firebrick and set a course of brick behind it. Brick and stone soak the heat up while the fire's roaring and let it back out slow for hours after the coals go gray. That's why the floor was still warm at dawn. The government's own building labs have the curves on it, plain physics, planted in your mind. Now, here's the part no laboratory can measure. The old folks in these hollers never read a word of that in any report. They knew it in their bones, because a cold cabin in Harlan County in January would kill you. I was 9 years old, January of '62. I came down before light to fetch kindling, and I stopped halfway down the stairs because I could feel the warm coming up through my sock feet off the floorboards. The fire had been out since midnight. Granddaddy Henry was already in his chair by the stove, and he saw me standing there puzzling on it. He put his hand flat on the brick beside the stove and said, "Boy, come feel this." It was warm as a biscuit. He said, "Any fool can make heat. The trick is keeping it. Most men send theirs up the chimney and call it winter." Then he showed me the piece of tin he'd fitted on the pipe, the thing that pulled the warmth back before it got away. I've kept a fire that same way every winter of my life, 63 winters. And that was the morning I understood the old men weren't behind the times. They just never wasted a thing. Now you might be thinking, "Wendell, if this works so good, how come everybody don't do it?" Well, most of the world still does. America's the one that quit. Go to Russia. The old Russian stove, they call it a pech, is a great brick mass in the middle of the house. You burn it hot for an hour in the morning, then you shut it, and that brick holds the heat and warms the whole home for a full day. Go to Finland and Sweden. The tiled masonry stove, the kakaloon, been in their homes 300 years. One arm full of birch, one fire, 12 hours of even heat. And the Koreans, 5,000 years ago, ran the smoke from the cook fire under the stone floor of the house and slept warm on the heat everybody else was throwing away. 5,000 years. Northern Europe and the Far East never threw that knowledge out. America had it too, and I can tell you the exact year we set it down. You'll remember the winter of '79, the oil crisis, the gas lines, fuel prices through the roof. Millions of families rushed back to wood heat all at once. Folks were building barrel stoves out of 55-gallon drums for $20, laying up brick mass heaters, fitting heat reclaimers on their pipes. Exactly the old way. And right about then, the manufactured stove industry and the insurance men sat down with the people who write the building codes. And all at once, in the code books, in the insurance manuals, in the inspector's handbook, the same idea showed up everywhere. Solid fuel heat had to be a listed, factory-built appliance, store-bought, stamped, approved. From that day, the barrel stove your uncle welded, the brick heater your granddaddy laid up, the $40 reclaimer on the pipe, all of it was suddenly unapproved. Your insurance man could deny your claim. Your inspector could red tag your house. So folks quit, and they bought the certified box off the showroom floor, and they forgot the trick. Not banned, not disproven, just erased. And who sat on those code committees? When folks went back and looked at who sat on those committees, it was thick with the appliance manufacturers and the insurance men. The very people who profit when you buy the box instead of building the trick. The foxes wrote the rules for the hen house, and the hens paid the fuel bill. The hearth products industry runs better than $5 billion a year now, and spends millions making sure the code stays exactly the way they wrote it. My granddaddy used to say, "When they make a thing against the rules, it's usually 'cause it worked too cheap." Mark that one. Now here's proof you can drive to and stand in front of. And here's the thing. The smartest builders in American history already knew it. Benjamin Franklin invented his iron stove in 1742 for this exact reason. To pull the heat back into the room instead of losing it up the flue. Thomas Jefferson heated Monticello with iron stoves and masonry he designed himself, because the man knew an open fire was a fool's furnace. Go out to Yellowstone and stand in the Old Faithful Inn. That great stone hearth and chimney is a heat-holding mass the size of a barn. And here's the kicker. The U.S. Department of Energy will tell you today, in its own plain writing, that adding mass and catching the flue heat raises a stove's real-world output by half or better, and that's the government lowballing it. The same government that let the code bury this in '79, admitting on paper the thing still works. They just made sure your daddy never read that page. So, here's how you do it. And I'm going to give you the honesty, including where I went wrong. The trick is 3 parts, and the whole of it runs about $40. First, the reclaimer. It's a little box of tin with tubes through it and a small fan, and it slips into your single-wall stovepipe about 18 inches up off the stove. Ask for it by name, a stovepipe heat reclaimer, or a flue heat exchanger. $40 at any farm and hardware. The flue heat that was leaving your house blows back into the room. Second, mass. Lay a course of firebrick behind and beside the stove. $30 of split firebrick. It drinks the heat and gives it back for hours after the fire's out. Third, and this part's free, the burn. You build it hot. Get a roaring fire and a deep bed of coals first. Then, and only then, you damp it down so it burns slow and the smoke catches a second time. And you burn dry wood, seasoned a full year, under 20% moisture. Get a little moisture meter, $15, and check it. Do just those 3 things and you'll cut your wood near in half this winter. I've watched men do it. But there's a 4th thing the old man on Black Mountain figured out that I never have. And it's the reason he hasn't bought a tank of fuel in 9 years. I'll take you to him. First, let me tell you about the night I near burned this cabin to the ground. Now here's the honesty most folks selling you a stove will never tell you. Here's where I went wrong, so you don't. The winter of '82, I was in a hurry and I choked a fresh fire down early on green wood, trying to make it last the night. By morning, I had a pipe caked in creosote, a cold cabin, and damn near a chimney fire. I could hear it roaring in the pipe like a freight train. Granddaddy was gone by then, but I heard him plain as day. Hot first, dry wood, always. Don't be me. A fellow over in Letcher County wrote me last year. Put the reclaimer and the brick on his daddy's old stove and went from burning 6 cords a winter down to 3. Cut his wood in half. That stove will outlast any furnace ever built, and the whole trick cost him $40. Now, before I take you up on Black Mountain to see the man who does this better than anybody alive, let me say this. Everything I've ever shown you, the root cellar, the wild plants, the smokehouse, this stove, it's all gathered in one place now. I call it Wendell's Almanac. The link's down in the description. But you stay right here, friend, because what that old man built into his own floor is the part nobody is talking about. Last October, I drove 6 hours up to Black Mountain to see it myself. There's a man up there, past 80 now, and his daddy built the cabin. He'd taken the old way as far as it goes. He ran the stovepipe through a long bench of brick and clay he built along the wall, so the smoke gives up near every degree of its heat to that mass before it ever reaches the chimney. He burns 1 armful of scrap wood of a morning. That bench stays warm to the touch 18 hours. The exhaust out his chimney is cool enough to hold your hand over. I asked him his heating bill. He looked at me like I'd asked him the color of the wind. "Nothing," he said. "House holds the fire. I burn what falls off my own trees." His neighbor down the road runs a propane furnace and pays better than $200 a month all winter, $2,400 a year, near $72,000 over 30 years. The old man on the mountain pays nothing. Same winter, same county. One of them knows the trick. Because here's the truth, and it's older than this country. The Romans warmed their bathhouses off the smoke under the floor. They called it a hypocaust. 2,000 years later, the settlers who came into these mountains lined their hearths with stone for the very same reason. Never having read a word of Latin. Nobody taught them. The cold did. Granddaddy showed me the morning the floor was warm in '62, and now I'm handing it to you. Every people that ever beat a hard winter without a furnace arrived at the same answer. Burn it hot, burn the smoke, and hold the heat in mass. The fire doesn't care about a building code. It doesn't read an insurance policy. It gave its warmth to a Roman and a Korean and a Kentucky settler the very same way, and it'll do it long after the last furnace ever sold has rusted into the ground. So this is what I want from you. Drop your state in the comments down below and tell me what you pay to heat your house through the winter. I read every one. And if your daddy or your granddaddy had a way of keeping a house warm, a soapstone on the stove, a heated brick wrapped in flannel at the foot of the bed, a way of laying a fire, I want to hear it. That knowledge belongs to all of us. If you're the kind of person who believes plain common sense got quietly pushed aside so somebody else could sell you the expensive version, well, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, because next week, I'm going to show you the smokehouse my daddy built behind this cabin in 1955. The one that kept a whole hog through a Kentucky summer with no electricity. and the 1967 federal rule that made good and sure your county would never let you cure your own meat again. You go on now. Build it hot, keep your wood dry, and come tell me how warm your floor got. From my porch to yours, Wendell.